Cathy, you bring rich and very rare experiences and lessons in designing and leading professional development and program development, first with community service.
Correct.
And then in service learning, so really for more than 30 years. Reaching back to your leadership in community service, how did volunteer opportunities in schools affect youth and also the communities in which they gave back?
What was going on then was quite interesting. I found that many schools really needed, when I would go around, I remember when we were starting this program, I went and interviewed every high school principal that I was working with, 39 high school principals in LA Unified, and said, what is important to you? What do you need? Because what we need to do in the field is find out what you need and see how service learning can be an answer to that. And even then, I started with that approach. And I remember what they needed most was good public relations. I said, I can help you with that. You know, we can get good stories of what young people are doing and create the opportunities. So this was very significant. Good stories about what public schools were doing was really critical back in those days. And I think remains important even today in our schools. The other part of it is that teachers would drive to schools all around Los Angeles, but it did not mean they had any interface with the community at all. None. I remember at George Washington Preparatory High School, which is a public high school, there was a teacher named Alan, and he drove from an area called the San Fernando Valley. He drove 15 miles a day to go to the inner city of Los Angeles to teach. And he'd been teaching there 18 years. And until he got involved in youth community service, he did not know one person or one place outside of the school grounds. So what we were enabling is for students to look at their community in a new lens. And I remember Alan once told me, he said he took a map, a 2-mile radius of his school, like one of those, maps that you can get from anywhere. And he put his school right in the middle where they were. And then from that 2-mile radius, he divided that whole area into slices of a pie. And the students went out and found out what were the organizations, the businesses, the nonprofits in that area. And we created documents for students to track and map and keep track. And I still use them in my book, The Complete Guide to Service, where I have some of the same tools I developed for Alan and his students to do community contact information. What had been lacking was this: what is our community? What is community? How do we interface? What can we do that's mutually beneficial? But how does the classroom extend outside of these walls? And students started developing different kinds of confidence and competencies than you can do sitting at a desk, 6-8 hours a day. They became inquisitive. They became engaged. They had questions. They noticed things about the community they brought in. And they developed this kind of fire, I would say. I remember in the early days, in fact, one of the early days we did this program, Diane Hadeen, who's one of my guiding lights in service learning from Minnesota, came out to speak at the first gathering we did of youth community service. It was in June. And I remember that all these school groups came and talked and reported on what they'd done. And the only story I really remember was from Jefferson High School. And the students got up and they said, well, we had this plan and we went out to go work with the convalescent home. We made all the arrangements. And the day we got there, the woman had been fired, so we couldn't do it. Then we went to the animal shelter. They said we were too young. And they went place to place to place to try and do something with engagement. And nothing worked. We were laughing. The way they delivered it was like stand-up comedy. But the kicker was, they said, but next year. And I realized what these kids were gaining that they can't gain from a textbook is resilience, understanding of community, developing partnerships, knowing how to really create effective relationships, knowing the skill sets we need for young people to be able to interface as professionals and young activists for the rest of their lives. And I remember there was one young man in these early programs named James Sakamoto, and he'd been doing so much with service. And I said to him, so James, what were you majoring in college? He said, business. I felt my heart drop. I thought, why isn't he going to social service or something that I think is important? And he said, and what's so exciting is as a business person, I've worked with so many nonprofits. I can see how they're terrible with business plans. I'll be able to do all this work pro bono and help them. Again, young people educating us about we need young people in all walks of life to know this background so they can be proficient in their life and act as service as part of who they are. So service learning in those days, or community service that was segueing into service learning, was very deep, giving young people and teachers the tools they needed to be effective. It wasn't just about the students. It was about equipping teachers to, back in those days, have what I called a Rolodex mentality. Now you'd have to call it something else. But the ability to connect with the community and create meaningful relationships and partnerships, that was what was really great. It was less about giving back, because a lot of those kids, if I said, do you want to give back? They'd say, wait, what have I gotten in the first place? It was about engaging them because they can, because they had passion, ideas, interests, skills, and talents to contribute. And that's what we were able to harness. And the benefits were really profound.